Okay, so you have probably been wondering where I've been. Those of you who have, I have been going through a lot of different things, and some of those things have been kind of recontextualizing my creative vision on what I want to do with my future. As much as I love doing fighting game content and the life-changing stuff that it has done for me, I've realized that there isn't too much of a future for me in that. Not that I don't think that I am not capable of making something of myself in fighting game content creation. It's just that I do not feel creatively fulfilled making all of this type of content. So, what I have decided to do is do something that I've been wanting to do since I was a kid. And that is make a video game. How did I land on this? Well, mainly it's just because I'm just like anyone else, especially if you're like a content creator, if you're a visionary, or if you make art or anything. I got a lot of ideas. Too many ideas. And for the longest time, what stopped me from making video games was I had this... Actually, it stops me from making anything, really, is that I had this insane fear that I have a very limited time on this planet. And that limited time is... I have so many different ideas during that limited time. And it's going to be impossible for me to make all of those ideas come true. Some of my ideas that I'm really attached to will have to die, will never see the light of day, will only be in my head. So picking a favorite for me was like picking a favorite kid. It felt like an impossible task for me. But eventually, after a little bit of, encouragement from others and talking to other people about how they dealt with similar issues, I finally decided to just sit down and make a video game. I began this process by purchasing RPG Maker. I know it's got quite a reputation for either being that one thing, that one engine that makes funny horror games that you remember PewDiePie streaming at when you were like 14, and poopy doo-doo garbage. However, stuff like recently Fear and Hunger, and also Fear and Hunger 2 were made, and I was really inspired by them. However, I didn't want to just start by, making my dream project or whatever, because that's what I heard like a lot of people come to the conclusion of trying to jump to immediately making their dream project. So I wanted to start by making smaller games, right? Completely learning the engine, making it feel as if I am the master of my engine before I even begin to start messing around with it, right? So in that case, I began to make smaller games. I messed around with a 2D engine one time because I saw someone make like a 2D platformer in RPG Maker, and I was like, how the hell does that happen? I want to see if I can pull that off. And I started to learn stuff about like plugins, sprite maps, sprite pages, how to balance like combat, how backsplashes work, the different sizes. I think one underrated thing that tutorials like almost never go over is like measurements, the size of certain things, what they should be, the length of certain things. It's really difficult to actually nail down. And once you look at it, I think it's one of the more intimidating things, is that it's just like, how big is this supposed to be? If I work on something for hours and hours, and then suddenly it's like way too small or way too big, am I going to have to completely scrap everything? Is it not going to work if I downsize it or if I upscale it? So those were like really scary things to learn. However, through this learning process, I slowly began to come up with the idea of what I wanted to make for my actual first big project. I was doing some inspiration searching, is what I call it, where I am just watching video essays about like older games. I'm really attached to the idea of taking ideas from older games that weren't really fleshed out because of the technology at the time and bringing them to life with the modern technology that we have now. Really taking a initial concept and then building upon that concept further and further, right? I absolutely, positively adore survival horror games. I also love RPGs, JRPGs, whatever, anything under the sun where if my number is bigger than yours and I hit you, you die, right? I love stuff like that. So after doing a little bit of research, I kind of also enjoy when games mix and mash different genres. Think about like a Nier Automata or, Nier Replicant, stuff where they like take a bunch of different genres and mash them all together into this one big collage of like a video game masterpiece or some shit, right? But I didn't want to go like full scale of just mixing 50 billion different genres, but I do like the idea where it takes like two basic core ideas and brings them together to make something kind of original. I thought to myself, what if I mashed together a survival horror game and an RPG into one? It's not like it's the most original idea. Like I said, I brought up Fear and Hunger originally, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to emulate the modern aesthetics of like, Resident Evil or Evil Within and stuff like that, right? Like, like guns, modern architecture and stuff like that. Like I wanted to be in like current day, right? So I couldn't think of anything that could possibly emulate that for me, like anything I could kind of like base that off of, until I remembered a certain game that did exactly that. Some of you may know this. Some of you may be hearing about this for the very first time, but I decided to base my game's main inspiration off of a little game called Resident Evil Gaiden. What Resident Evil Gaiden was a Game Boy Color game where Capcom wanted to bring Resident Evil to handheld systems. You can imagine that emulating the gameplay loop of Resident Evil on a Game Boy Color would be incredibly challenging. And from what it sounds like, and from what it looks like, it was. However, the way that gameplay flowed in Resident Evil Gaiden was really, really fascinating. The way it would work is that you had a firing stance, just like in Resident Evil, where you can't move, but you had a little reticle pop up. It was a top-down view. It was good, like really surprisingly good sprite work for Game Boy Color. It was a top-down view, and what you would do is that you would aim with a reticle. And if your reticle came into contact with a zombie, you were able to shoot them, and combat would commence. However, how shooting would work on the Game Boy Colors, because you can't traditionally aim, you would have a QTE sequence. A little slide bar would pop up, and a bar would go back and forth, and back and forth. I'll show gameplay on the screen, of course, but the slide bar will go back and forth, and back and forth. And there was a critical hit spot, a regular hit spot, and then if you didn't hit any of those, you would miss, right? If you would hit the crit, you would get a bunch of damage. You could possibly like one-shot kill a zombie because you would pop them in the dome. That's essentially what like the crit spot was, is that you're aiming for the head. If you started combat with a gunshot, zombies would start further away from you. So it would take a couple of turns for them to get closer to you to attack you. If we flip that around, if a zombie manages to make contact with you before you make contact with them, they get the first turn to attack. And also they get to, immediately attack you from then on, right? Like you don't have time to, aim, you don't have time to really do anything. You have to just immediately act fast and hope that you can land like a crit or something, or get away from the fight. It's a really fascinating gameplay loop. It is this idea where, do I take this fight and do I use my resources and ammunition to kill zombies ahead of me, or do I try to avoid it? Because if I get caught, I'm going to have to use even more resources to get away from this fight. I could ramble on hours about it. Anyway, the really, really simple gameplay loop of that was like, it was awesome. It was super like, I don't know why it's so fascinating to me, but it's like, I love when developers are forced into these situations where they have to become so creative about emulating certain aspects from like another game. So they're like, how do we make Resident Evil, a traditionally known 360-degree 3D third-person shooter, onto an isometric Game Boy game? Like, and then they kind of did it. They kind of pulled it off. It was really limited, and you couldn't really do a whole lot of stuff, but the stuff that was there was really fascinating. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to build on that concept of combat. I wanted to build on the concept of like the QTE slide action bar for combat. So yes, Resident Evil Guide's entire combat system, I essentially have it. Except there are going to be a lot of key differences that I won't spoil here. However, expect that to be the main gameplay flow when it comes to combat. There's going to be like different weapons, items, stuff like that that's going to deeply change the game. Also, different types of enemies that will change the game as well. Not to say that Resident Evil Guide didn't have those different types of enemies, but still. That whole gameplay loop is what really inspired me to be able to really be like, okay, I have a clear, cohesive vision for my game. The problem was that I am really, really, really new at programming. Like, I am a baby when it comes to programming. So when it came to the really complex stuff, RPG Maker can be really program noob friendly. I've made a lot of projects without even really having to program all that much. And even if I did have to program, it was very, very little. So it's not as scary as it seems, but when it came to more complex stuff, sometimes even simple stuff that you can make in other engines can be incredibly complicated because of all the hoops and ladders you have to jump through in order to be able to make something work outside of RPG Maker's initial control. So I came to the conclusion that RPG Maker was not going to cut it. I felt like kind of a coward for not being able to make it work like that because I've seen so many different games. I've seen so many different games and like game developers make so many fantastic, insane things in RPG Maker, but I am just not as well equipped as them in order to be able to make it work. Maybe in the future when, maybe after this process is done, after I get a little bit better at coding, I could make something really incredible in RPG Maker, but for now, the best course of action for me, especially if I wanted to actually see this game see the light of day, was to change engines. We're super early in the project. Changing engines isn't really that much of a risky move, and I heard of, and you may have heard of this too, a little game engine called Game Maker Studios. It's really good. I like it a lot. It's essentially like if Unreal, or like if maybe this is bad because Unreal and Unity have kind of like a bad reputation. However, you will understand what I mean after my analogy. It's kind of like if RPG Maker and Unreal had a baby. That's kind of what a Game Maker is. You can make a bunch of like different types of stuff, of course. However, you can also make RPGs. Like there's dedicated sprite mapping stuff and like really, really cool tools for making RPGs and sprite-based RPGs as well. So I was really excited to hear about that, but my big problem is that it's open source and you are able to have an absolute assload of freedom. So much freedom to do whatever you want in Game Maker. The problem is that with that freedom comes you needing to know more about coding to be able to do the things you want to do. I have so much of a basic understanding of coding that the moment that it started to get even a tiny bit complex, I wasn't going to be able to do as much as I was able to do in RPG Maker. So I decided to make the executive decision to build a team. I invited two people to actually join me on the project, and thankfully they said yes. I have a lead artist. Our lead artist, his name is Tanya. They go by Soul Kitten on social media. All of their socials will be in the description. They are also on the screen. She makes really good art. I am very, very happy with a lot of her stuff. She's even come up with her own comic. That's how sick she is. She's so dope. She's so goated. I love her. Go check out all of her stuff. We even got some concept art being cooked up as we speak. You can see some of it here. I'm so serious. We're really starting out big with this stuff, man. We're really getting the ball rolling here. And I also have a lead programmer. I am an assistant artist to our lead artist, and I'm also able to help a little bit with program tweaking when it comes to that department. However, I am acting basically as like lead director. I'm also running a lot of the social media stuff as well. But regardless, with this little team, I am finally able to announce that we have started to enter full development on our game, working title, a survival horror RPG, Above the Fold. Not only am I announcing the title of our game here, I'm also announcing the title of our indie dev studio, our indie game dev studio. We are going to be known as MUNCHMUNCH Games. The reason why is because our lead programmer made a funny little dude in MS Paint, and I liked the colors he chose, and I liked the shape of the guy. I came up with a name for him, and MUNCHMUNCH came to mind when I saw him. So MUNCHMUNCH Games. Really, it's inspirational work, inspirational name. Expect that type of professionality in future works. I have also made every damn social media under the sun for our company. We are going to be making multiple types of content, game dev content exclusively. Or not exclusively, specifically. We are going to be making game dev content specifically. Show you guys our process, show you guys our creative vision, things that we would maybe even want your guys' opinion on. Really get you guys deep into our thought process when it comes to making a game, because I know a lot of you people, just like me, want to make a game as well. So getting into that creative process with us could maybe inspire you to take the steps you need to make a game as well. So I hope you guys are ready for this wild ass ride we're about to go on. If we finish the game, it'll be fantastic. I have the utmost faith in my team and myself that we can produce a really good product. If it doesn't happen, I think it's going to be a worthwhile experience regardless. So I know you guys subscribe to me for fighting game content. I know you guys have mainly done that, but I'm going to be honest with you, this is probably the most important thing to me right now. And I hope that the majority of you can join me and my team on this journey. And I hope you guys get to really see that I'm more than capable of doing something like this. So stay tuned, and don't forget to follow MUNCHMUNCH Games.